Good and evil are often discussed as if they were visible. Atheists will often claim they know good from evil. They express a familiarity that is more imagined than real. No one can point to evil in the real world. That is, there is nothing that comes through the senses to the brain, that is evil. It is what we think about the impression that labels one thing evil and another good. No one can point to good, as an objective thing. However, a lot of people think they are good and therefore, what they do is good. We might ask what their standard is. Many others do not believe evil exists. How can anyone be good if no one is evil? Some say Trump is evil. He is compared to Hitler. But then others claim Hitler was good or his intentions were noble. Has evil, as a term, any meaning, or is it just a derogatory appellation? If there is no objective evil, can anyone decide what evil is? Is evil those things that irk a person? The relativization of evil simplifies the problem, but to relativize evil is to invalidate it. An evil that is reduced to a personal dislike, is an evil that no longer attains to what evil is. If evil is what I say it is, if I become the judge of what is evil, either I am God or just another neurotic. But how is evil a sentient entity, or a supernatural force in a world composed of only physical things? Dictionaries define a concept as an idea. Concepts are abstract ideas. Evil is an idea, but then is evil just something we create in our own minds? Concepts are units of communication. Concepts are not words nor letters nor sentences. These may or may not form concepts depending on if they contain information. A concept is a unit of information. Evil in this sense is not just a word, it conveys information. There is a word evil, and there is the concept of evil. The word elicits the concept and conveys the idea as a unit of information. The question is, where does the concept of evil originate from, and is it grounded in something real? Hippocampus is a word and a concept also, but it communicates information only if the hearer understands what the word refers to. It is a concept of limited value because it is an idea of limited use. A brain surgeon experiences the word differently. Brain surgeons have modified the term way beyond what I have. Normal people would not understand a brain surgeon talking about the hippocampus. The hippocampus for a surgeon is a very complex idea with a comparable language created to discuss it. It was not matter, energy, space and time that created the language around the hippocampus. Our language develops in lockstep with the development of our concepts. Once we have established that the hippocampus refers to a region of the brain, we have excluded references to auto mechanics. No connection to trees, Chinese cuisine, physicists and peanuts are made either. Concepts are logically connected. A child might think his or her parents are evil for the time he or she must go to bed. But this application or connection soon loses its meaning. One's bedtime does not reflect the nature of evil as the concept becomes better understood by the maturing child. As the child's conception of evil changes, her reality changes. Our reality is our concepts. What we have no conception of, is not real to us. What the child has no conception of is not real to the child. This is a problem for adults. We cannot teach them about what is beyond their reality to conceive. When we think about evil, we either think about what evil is as a concept, or our ability to communicate evil will become incoherent. Our capacity to have a reality is dependent on our ability to fashion concepts that are coherent and connected. A reality of simple concepts is a mind that is unable to solve complex problems. Secularists do not worry about the nature of evil, because for a secularist the word has no complex meaning. You might wonder if evil is real or just a concept. But what is the difference? How would you define the difference between what is real and a concept about reality, when all that you know is the concept? Reality is a concept as real as the conception is made real. Is the concept of evil less real to you, because you define reality as that which is encompassed in matter, energy, space and time? It must be because the concept of evil is not compatible with how you think of reality. Evil and nature are concepts that conflict. We may define matter as something independent of human mind, but how does matter exist, at least for us, without its mental construct? Is not the very independence of matter from mind, conceptual? The world is composed of matter because the concept of the world brings to mind something made of matter, and matter is a concept we use to describe what the world is made up of. We cannot ask if the world makes sense, we can only ask if our concepts make sense. How does reality have existence without that existence being defined in conceptual terms? We need to ask if our concepts make sense from an analytical perspective. Christians say the world contains good and evil in much the same way as secularists would say the universe contains positive and negative ions. Secularists may reply that the comparison is only superficially true. Positive and negative charges can be measured. They can be, but not by a bathroom scale nor by an odometer. The concept of evil cannot be quantified by using measures that are conceptually unconnected to evil. Secularists say evil does not exist because evil is not composed of matter, energy, space and time. But this merely begs the question as to what existence is and how do we define it. What do we measure when we measure the expansion of space and time but the numerical increase in the units of measure applicable to the thing we are measuring? Evil is not in time and space, so why ought we be able to contain it within our concepts of time and space? If we are to prove the presence of evil, we have to know how to measure it. We need to be able to measure evil if we are to demonstrate it as a concept that can be communicated. We assume evil is a subjective and supernatural, because evil has not been quantified. In other words, evil has little meaning, because its existence has not been calibrated. Matter, energy, space and time have the reality they do because they can be measured. We know what space is because we walk it. Our concept of evil precludes a rational debate because rational ideas need to be quantified or quantifiable. The way we are told to think about good and evil is as two extremes separated by an infinity of gray that is neither all good nor all evil. If this way of thinking about evil was conceptually valid, we would be required to assume God and Satan are equidistant from normality. God and Satan are an infinite distance from normality, there being no boundary to either. God and Satan are of equal power and influence. God could not have created Satan. Satan is the equal of God. Oh, if Satan is not the equal of God, then he must have been created by God. Oh, Satan is the equal of God or the creation of God. God and Satan are on the same dimensional continuum and are therefore two extremes of the same substance. There is no discontinuity between good and evil, they are intrinsically connected. Without Satan, God would have no identity. The nature of God only makes sense relative to the nature of Satan, and vice versa. God is therefore dependent on Satan for his nature. If God is continuous with Satan, their natures are blended. If this is so, there is no God or Satan, for the definition of God requires transcendence over Satan, nor relativism. If normalcy is an infinite distance between two infinitely distant extremes, God and the devil are both infinitely divorced from mankind. If God and the devil are infinitely divided one from the other, they are infinitely related to one another, which is incoherent. Oh, if good and evil are intrinsic to one another or relative to one another on a one-dimensional continuum, they do not exist, at least not as an infinitely good God and an evil satanic being. Oh, if Satan is divorced from God, meaning the continuum is broken at some point, then they cannot vie for the souls of man. That God is neither omniscient or all-powerful and cannot defeat evil. Good cannot defeat evil if evil is equal to good. There is no salvation. We cannot be saved if the power against us is equal to the power for us. There is no good and evil. If both are equal in power, they are not different. Oh, if good is good, good ought to be stronger, or better than evil. Oh, how can good and evil be two infinitely separated points on an infinitely long continuum and one be better than the other? That God and Satan irrelevant. If God and Satan are an infinite distance from each other and from us, what relevance can they have to each other or to us? Oh, how can two infinities exist when a relativistic universe cannot contain any absolutes or infinities? Oh, how can two absolutes exist when their very nature bespeaks an infinite division between us and them? It ought to be obvious we need a new conception of good and evil and their relationship. If we assume good and evil are two groups of persons and each group has a different conception of good and evil, or Platonic ideal of what good and evil are, then we can devise a new pictograph. Think of two donuts, one feeding into the other. This would give us a picture in which evil might transform into good. This is scriptural, regardless of if it fits into the atheist paradigm, or not. This representation helps us to see the large gray area of normality does not exist here. One is either saved or not. One is either a sheep or a goat, in biblical parlance. This however suggests believers are good and unbelievers evil, and this is not biblical nor substantiated by observation. So, we need to develop a better way of representing good and evil. A more sophisticated way of thinking about sin is a line divided in half. Sin cannot just pass into good. Nor can people become infinitely evil. Sin can only go so far. The extreme is Satan, who represents the epitome of evil. However, Satan is a created being, and so we do not have to deal with the issues of infinity. The key element in this way of thinking is the division of normalcy into two groups consistent with the previous depiction of sheep and goats. Mankind is divided into the saved and unsaved, but there is no intermixture, one is one or the other. This is consistent with the idea that Jesus saves. This gives us a foundation for the idea there is a line, invisible and infinitely thin, between believers and unbeliever, and yet the conceptual divide is so great it is as if a great chasm divided us. As we are talking about concepts, the impenetrability of the barrier has more to do with conceptual purity than it has to do with anything in the visible world. If evil is tied up with the nature of Satan, then evil is only as far from God as Satan is far from God. This does not suggest infinity. God is infinitely good simply because he is the definition of good. Good, as the measure of God, provides no limit to his goodness. Man does not aspire to godliness, nor is there the potential of becoming gods. Our godliness is held back by both our sin and our own corporeal reality. We die and our species is to come to an end in Armageddon. Only a few individuals take the branch to satanic possession, and the rest of us improve and fall, but some do it within the security of our salvation and others do it within the expanse of false religion, agnosticism and atheism. Evil is a concept centered on a creature, not God, not infinite but not mortal. Good and evil are sharply defined and given a sharp line to divide one from the other, consistent with what our minds tell us is the case. This is true, regardless of the theology one prefers or rejects. If evil is evil and good is good, they ought to be like oil and water and not mix. None of this requires us to be versed in theology. It is based simply on what makes sense to us, as human beings. The concept of evil, if it is to be useful to us, must make sense. Words need to convey information. If we call someone evil, it must mean something consistent and communicable. Words need meaning if they are to be used as tools of communication. Evil cannot mean good nor be confused with what is good. The key to understanding good theologically is to use the literal, common-sense meaning. Things that are good are things that have value. There is no need to study scripture or ancient tomes of moral philosophy nor the writings of the Church Fathers. Good equals value. God is good, so God has value. God is infinitely good and so represents infinite value to us. Ultimately, these terms have market application. They can and ought to be interpreted in an economic way, for they have economic application. God is not good simply because he self-identifies as good. The world is not good simply because he said it is. God created us and the world so that we would find him good. This is not a metaphysical argument. God is good because he has real-world consequences. The real question that must be resolved is if good and evil are subjective or real, that is substantive. If the idea of good and evil are not subjective terms, they ought to be quantifiable and their actions, verifiable. This is an interesting conclusion because value has an economic component, in that what is good has value and value is linked to what can be considered economic. If good and evil are not simply the consequence of God saying so, good and evil become valid points of discussion apart from theological considerations. If that which is good is that which we, as humans, value, then what is good is synonymous with that which has value in the economic sense. It is not God that gives value, it is human beings, so we determine that which is good by that which we value. What we value can be given an economic component and designated in terms of dollars and cents. What God did is good because it all has economic impact. Indeed, what God did serves as the basis of our economy. I value peace, so peace has value for me. Peace is a good. I strive for peace, but safety is also a good, and so I also strive to ensure me and mine are safe. Safety is a good and peace is a good, and they both require time and other assets to provide them. I have many other things I value. That creates the need for a market. I need a way to allocate what I have towards getting what I want. Markets are ways of getting things I value, things I think are good. So good has an economic correlate. The market takes us out of the position of a child that wants everything in unlimited quantities and forces us to prioritize in a way that is quantified. The economy turns our wants into a basket of goods. What then is evil? If good is getting what I want for a price I want to pay, or more broadly, things which have value, then evil is the inversion of this. Evil has no value. War destroys peace and criminals take away what I paid for. They are not good things because they take value but give nothing in exchange. Evil consume value, whereas what is good processes value to produce things of even greater value. My getting good things is dependent on my ability to take what I have and exchange it for what I want more. This is the market. But what if war intervenes? War is evil because war has come between me and my prosecution of wants. I do not want war, I do not value war. I use what I have, including my life, to get rid of war and get what I want, which is peace. Evil as an economic factor is what are called social costs. Unemployment, pollution, war, debt, inflation, taxation, and crime are all things I do not want, but they create costs I must pay just to get rid of them or at least moderate their influence. Evil increases economic loss. Evil increases the level of risk we face and the threat of loss. Evil strips us of value. In fulfilling the Christian mission, a person is simply removing that which represents economic risk. The church becomes an institution moderating risk. Doing good means, one is increasing the economic value of the church, or more broadly, the community, or more widely still, the value of the planet. These things are measurable in a quantified way. Doing what is right mitigates risk, and that means, we reduce threats of loss. We do good by producing value. This is done through work. The things that are good are the fruit of the good works we do. Doing good or being good means, one is adding more value and reducing risk. We add value by producing more than what we consume. Work creates a social profit for the community one is in. Through economics one can reconcile the secular and sacred ideas of good and evil into a single vision of communities of people who work together to create a common goal, a prosperous community and a prosperous world. The key is to identify areas of risk, or sources of cost. All evil is a cost. This is imposed on society and future generations, without compensation. Each individual must be responsible for his or her own costs. Our communities must be market-driven with all costs accounted for to remove risk for the rest. Only when we achieve this level of accounting excellence will good and evil become meaningful terms useful in the economic as well as the theological realm.